What up, Zoo?
What up, Ed? What's poppin'?
Same old, same old. How you feeling?
Good, man. What you got for us?
All right. Today I have a moon video. We've done moon in the past. I don't know if we did it on this channel, but we did one of his videos before. This video is titled "The Biggest Wealth Transfer in History," I believe. Um, yeah, the biggest wealth transfer in history is happening right now. Are you ready? All right, you ready to go?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right.
After decades of recessions and struggle, most people just aren't hopeful for the future of the economy. In a 2023 survey conducted by the Wall Street Journal, nearly 80% of Americans said they don't think the next generation will live better lives. Young people are afraid they'll be stuck in low-paying jobs forever, barely earning enough to survive, let alone retire. Recently though, the idea of a great wealth transfer has been seen by some as a light at the end of the tunnel. Over the next 20 years, the silent generation and the baby boomers will pass away, leaving an estimated $84.4 trillion in savings and assets behind. It's a whole lot of money, and hopefully it's enough to tip the scales back towards a more equal playing field. But will this actually happen, and how much of the money will the average person see?
What do you think, Zoo? You have hopes that your kids are gonna live a better, more fruitful life than you in France?
I mean, yeah, only because my childhood was, nothing spectacular. Hopefully, um, hopefully, but at the same time, I don't really think about it too much. Like whatever happens, happens. I don't and I don't think about them when it comes to money because most of my life has been consumed with money, living paycheck to paycheck and watching, like I was telling somebody this week in Serbia because he does kung fu, Shaolin actually, and I was telling him how you and I did kung fu for a little bit, and I asked the shifu, I said, "Oh, it's hard watching these advanced students and being so beginner." And he said, if you're constantly watching other people, you'll never get better yourself. And so that and then this job I had where I was installing home theaters and really expensive stereos in rich people's houses, crawling in their crawl space, and I was barely able to afford like a nice lunch to bring with me, and it was frustrating to see these rich people. But after those two experiences, I don't really worry too much about money. I mean, if I don't have money in a specific week or month, it definitely affects my mind. I like to have a little bit to feel free, but I don't want my kids to have to worry about money so much. So I think I consciously don't worry about money for them. Uh,
Well, do you, would it be fair to say that the more money you have, the less you have to worry about it, and the less money you have, the more you end up worrying about it?
I mean, yes, it would be fair to say that, but I don't think that's a good way to live. I mean, I think part of the reason why I do appreciate being in France so much is because people here are not consumed by how much money they have. Like people, because since you have free healthcare, people, and I feel like people are not greedy. Like people make a good living even at low, low
Low skill.
paying jobs. Yeah. And because there's good quality of life. So I think being here, it's a conscious decision to think less about money in my life, and hopefully they grow up with that as well. But yeah, it's not pleasant to be constantly worrying about money, and I think it's not. One of my ex used to have a mantra. She would say to herself, "Money comes easy and often." And I'm like, but you're broke. Like, why, you know? And she's like, yeah, but I mean, I can't be worrying about it all the time. And it does. It comes and it goes, and it's really it's dilapidating. Like it's a handicap to be constantly worried about money.
I mean, it's a
And
handicap to constantly need to worry about.
yeah,
Because if you are broke, if you're financially struggling, your your stress levels are higher. That's been proven. And
yeah,
when your stress levels are higher, your sleep is worse. You're literally less intelligent because your
yeah,
cortisol levels are higher. And so to have a little bit of financial security definitely makes the quality of life better. So I guess having a social safety net like you do in France, and I guess like we do here, but to a less extent, um,
yeah.
gives you some mind. But the thing
If
is,
it,
this video is talking about, we're projecting out into the future. We're talking about, the passing on of two generations and the stockpile of wealth that they possess being disseminated amongst everyone else, which I don't know if I buy that 100% because there are going to be estate taxes and all these other, and it's probably not going, if you don't have anyone of means, uh, that is going to leave you money directly, then we're talking about just, um, money, in the abstract being released into the economy that may or may not benefit you uh, indirectly somehow.
yeah,
But
we're not. I don't think either of us are in a position to be leaving our kids real money unless something,
no, not
lucky.
like life changing money, but money. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, because I mean, well, in our 40s, as we are, I would assume we're both still trying to make sure that we can retire. And I think the first thing you can leave your kids is, or the first thing you can avoid leaving your kids is a burden. So if we have sufficient means to see ourselves through to the end of our lives without requiring them to step up and provide some kind of support for us, then that's the first gift we can give them. Meaning that I'm not going to be knocking on your door, having to move into your house with your young family when I'm dilapidated and old. That I'm not going to need you to, financially support me in any way. That I'm not going to leave you funeral expenses or debt once I pass on. And then
Yeah,
beyond that, then we're in the black and we're talking about, all right, maybe I am leaving you some money. Maybe I am leaving you some assets. And then beyond that, then maybe those assets are in a trust so that you don't have to pay taxes on them. Going along with the legal system here as well as I know it. I don't know how it works out in France, but um, and yeah, and then once you get to the point where you can cover yourself through retirement, then you start thinking about what you can leave behind to your kids. That's one part of your legacy, obviously, and the other part being what
the
you're doing.
wisdom.
Yeah, and what you're doing to, yeah, wisdom, as well as just what you're doing in society to, to make the world better than you found it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even, but
So
but
go ahead, finish your thought.
no, so the question I was posing is like, what's your take on, where society is going? We both live in Western countries. Um, I don't know what the forecast is in France, but here we're looking at, um, a huge debt,
Yeah.
which was passed on to us by these generations that they're talking about in this video, and that we're going to pass pass forward to our kids and our grandkids. We're talking about a lot of political instability. In the U.S., we're talking about the possibility over the next 30 years or less of the U.S. no longer being the leader in the world economy. Um, we're talking about inflation, things costing more, there being less to divvy up amongst more and more people. We're talking about also the declining birth rate, where we don't have as many people to fill the roles that these uh, older generations are leaving open. So the tax base, the amount of people to pay taxes that are going to pay for that social safety net that you're talking about. If there aren't people there to do that, then where is that? Where are these resources that you're claiming your kids are going to benefit from? Where are they going to get funded from? You know, um, so I know that you guys in France have the same problems where you have immigrants who are coming into your country, and the you being one of them, I guess, but the native population of Europeans is getting displaced by people from other parts of the world, and even then, the population of countries like yours and mine are decreasing. So
Yeah.
these are all things that are up on deck. That our kids are going to have to deal with.
So in France, there people are upset about them pushing back the retirement age.
Okay.
That's the main issue. Immigration is not really such an issue that I'm aware of here, but there is the pushing back of the retirement age that people are upset about. But just to go back to what I was trying to say earlier, for me, like I really want to teach my kids um, the concept of not worrying, letting money become an issue, whether it's too little or too much changing them. Like I really want to make sure that they have a good understanding that money is not so important. And I think that if I look back at my own life, even the times that I am worried about money, I think it's an unnecessary worry, because I've been in situations where I've made $10 last 2-3 weeks, eating tuna, whatever, like doing what needs to be done and getting through it. And so I just want to be able to teach my kids a good work ethic, and I want to
Yeah, but
teach them.
that's struggle life, and you know, I feel like part of the reason why you might say that is because you live in a part of the world where, in the back of your mind, that there is a social safety net there for you.
Yeah,
There are places in the world that don't have that, and people
yeah,
definitely have to worry about money on some level, or if not money, then some kind of participation in the economy, whether it be selling something, trading something. You go to a third world country, you don't see people sitting at home. People are outside, getting
yeah.
after it. People,
But if
coming
you
up.
wouldn't you agree though that, like, if your kids have a good work ethic, then they'll never have to worry about money? Like, isn't that more important than money? Because money comes and goes. Like, jobs come and go. Some people get lucky and have a talent, some others don't, most others don't. And I think that regardless of the situation around money, if you have a good work ethic and good values, as a kid, then money, I would love for my kids to not think about money too much, you know
Well, I
because
mean,
it's
what is a work ethic is literally you trying to provide service in exchange for money? Are you being conscious of
Yeah.
your usefulness in a work environment?
Yeah, just not being afraid to work hard to get what you need.
Right, right, right. Yeah, but if there are no jobs, or if there's, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but
There's always going to be jobs. I mean, come
uh,
on. Why would
um,
there be no jobs? You talking about AI or something? I don't understand.
I'm just talking about, yeah, there are, we live in a place where there are more tiers to the job market. You have, those instrumental jobs, skilled jobs, where you need, you have a government, so you need lawyers and you need doctors. You have the medical infrastructure, so you have doctors. You have, you need engineers and electricians and, mechanics and all these things. All right, that's skilled labor. We also have a huge service industry, right? And the service industry exists just because of their surplus capital, their surplus money available to those higher tiered workers that make it possible to support the service industry. If you're a dog walker, or you are a fitness instructor, or a coach, or any, or you're a barista, you're there because somebody has money to spend on your services. You know what I mean? People, if you're a dog walker and nobody can afford to keep a dog as a pet, or then beyond that, pay somebody to come and walk their dog and give them enrichment throughout while they're at work. So the job market can definitely shrink. I mean, just travel to other countries where unemployment is like 30%. You know what I mean? And you have
Yeah, but
people that just kind of languish. And what is it aside from, we're not there, we're nowhere near there, but who's to say that, in the next 50 years we can't get there?
but first of all, the service industry is not limited to people with a lot of money. Like every service industry is everywhere, McDonald's,
Right,
part of
right,
the
right.
service
Yeah, yeah,
industry.
yeah. But yeah, 100%. Right. But those things are luxury. Those aren't essential things for people to live.
Yeah, but
And
a grocery store is a service industry. So it's
right,
not,
right.
you
I
know.
know, I hear what you're saying, but that service industry could shrink dramatically once you get rid of yoga instructors and um, any number of other jobs that fall into that type of work. Yeah, you might have waitresses and waiters and chefs. Yeah, okay, at restaurants. But if fewer people are going out, you're not going to have as many of those jobs or as many of those establishments. You know, um,
It's it sounds like you're predicting like some downfall of society. I don't,
no, 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 no,
you
no.
know.
I'm not. I just think that the places that are benefiting from a good economy might not be benefiting from that type of economy or that type of status in the future, and other places that are developing might, that economy might shift over there.
Yeah, but
That, but
I'm not worried about a macro economy. I'm worried about micro, my family, like if my family, if
yeah,
my kids.
but you live within the larger economy, so you're,
Yeah, but I don't
you
control
can't take
that.
for
I don't have
granted.
any
You don't
control over
control,
that.
of course, but what are we talking about? A wealth transfer.
I don't
That's
know. You only
that's
let
that.
40 seconds play.
All right.
What are
Well,
we
let me
talking
say
about?
more. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, we just went off on a tangent, but either way, yeah, no, no, no. All right, let's get back into the video.
Of course, when you mention a wealth transfer, it's hard not to think about the pandemic. For a lot of people, it was like the 2008 recession happened all over again. When it first hit, millions lost their jobs in industries like hospitality. And from March of 2020 to
Okay, sorry to stop it again. That's an example of what I'm talking about, right? When there's an economic crunch, right? When there's a something that constrains the economy, right? The first people that go are hospitality, service industry, right? That's the first thing that drops off, right?
Yeah,
And that's
but
what I'm saying.
my point is that no matter what external circumstances there are, if you have a work ethic and a little bit of creativity, you're going to find a way to make money. There's always going to be ways, especially during a pandemic or any
If
kind of.
if you live in an economy where 95% of the people can find a way to make money, right? Let's say there's 5% unemployment, and then that unemployment shoots up to 30 or 40% unemployment, right? For whatever reason, like during the pandemic when only essential workers were allowed to go to work, then all of a sudden that 95% gets cut, and the lower, you know 25-35% of that is unable, unskilled, or not skilled enough to get work, to work. You know what I mean? So it's just about, the providing jobs for everybody is not a given. Just being able to go out and get a job is not a given. You need an economy that supports, that gives you that privilege. You know, um,
I
you
don't
feel
really
like,
see it. I don't really see it that way. I don't see waiting for a job to be available as the only option. I feel like you can
all
figure
right,
it out
let's
and,
look at it like this. Let's say there are people that live in a beach town, right?
yeah. Mhm.
And it's booming from people visiting that beach town. And then all of a sudden, people can't afford to travel to that beach town. What
Mhm.
happens to all the people that work there? They're creative enough and they have the work ethic, so they're gonna find money. No, the money's
Okay.
not coming. You feel me?
Okay.
So
Yeah, that makes
that's an
sense.
example that carries over to every industry, right? If people can't afford to go buy Starbucks, there's no Starbucks, right?
Right, but in that example, right? Those people that have lost their job, why can't they just um
They can
you know,
move.
no, well not a, that's expensive. So you can't, it's not an easy option,
Well,
right?
what's more expensive, that or creating new industries?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, like, all right, I'm just trying to stick with the example of a small beach town, right? What could they do? Um, well, I don't know. I think the main thing in the back of my mind is like what we're doing. You know, in the pandemic, we saw this boom of social media and people becoming like digital entrepreneurs, and I think that opened up a big, channel for everyone, and remote working. Like now there's a
Yeah,
ton of people who, you know,
yeah, there are, but it's past its peak, right? So let's say, yeah, everyone can get on YouTube and make videos, right?
or create a digital product or something like that.
Okay, yeah, yeah, you
Learn how to
can,
do
but
something
who's gonna, but what digital product are you gonna make that is not,
saturated.
that,
Yeah.
no, not that, but like that is really essential, right? So it's like people watch other people on YouTube and TikTok and social media in general, right?
Hmm.
But that's only because there aren't so many people doing it. Like you can't have 50% of the people in a society be social
Yeah.
media influencers,
Of course.
because
Yeah.
right, and or at least you can't have them try to do that and expect to make a living at it. There
Yeah.
is a threshold where you know it is saturated, and you can't, and even if everyone was getting watched evenly,
Yeah.
those,
Yeah. But
that,
also,
and nobody would be making
Yeah,
big
but
money.
not even social media. I agree because there's way too many influencers out there, and they're not influencing much of anything. But what about Chat GPT, AI, right? You could
Yeah.
between AI and YouTube, you could learn almost any skill that you want to, and if you put your mind to it,
I mean, in
it
theory, but in practice, I mean, why
you
aren't
need the
you and I,
opportunity. Yeah,
not even opportunity, but all right, tell that to somebody who lives in India. Yeah, you get on Chat GPT and you can learn how to do this, that, the other. All right, well, first he needs a computer, he needs a cell phone, then he needs internet and Wi-Fi. Then
yeah,
there are things that we just take for granted that we have
true.
access to, give us that
That's
put us
true.
on that platform where to make it even possible. But then, all right, once it's possible, then yeah, you do need a work ethic. But even then, it's like we both use Chat GPT. Have either of us made money by using it directly? We've used it to enhance our work, maybe, right? Or to make parts of our work easier, or to
Yeah.
make our performance better at work. But it hasn't resulted in, like, you know what, I'm gonna pay you X more. Well, maybe it has actually, but like, but it's not. It's
No, I
not.
hear.
You feel
I
what I'm
hear
saying?
you. Yeah, but I think what I'm in the back of my mind, I'm thinking this is not a new problem. Like there's always been from the beginning of time, there's always been people, even it's only recent that people are making a lot of money, you know? It never used to be like that. People used to be poor and they
It
find a
never
way.
used to be like this.
Right.
No, people used to be poor and not find money. People used to be poor and starve. People used to be poor and have to rely on other people, right?
Right.
People used to be poor and subsist off of the land, right?
Right.
It's never been the case where you've had so much. You know, you and I, neither of us make a whole lot of money at our jobs, right?
Hmm.
Or, like you're saying, living paycheck to paycheck, there's the lifestyle creep and everything else. Fine. You know, um, but but for us to we both live better than a king lived in, the 10th century, right? Like we both have more access to more luxury goods, more free time, more, you know,
Yeah.
you know, than the average person. Definitely the average person. And the 5-day work week. When did that come into effect? That you were talking about 100 years ago or less. You know, so we live in a period of time that is unlike any other. And who's to say that this period of time is going to persist? You know,
Yeah.
um, you know, we can both say, all right, when I retire and stop working, I'm going to be able to receive a check from the government every month. Maybe not for enough for me to travel the world and live lavishly, but enough for me to pay my bills and put food in my fridge and live on a fixed income. Like all the old people you see shuffling around. Oh, I'm going to the grocery store and oh, I'm going to feed the birds and like just doing the most mundane shit, going to sit on a bench somewhere and watch life pass them by. These are people that are on fixed incomes that don't have the option to do anything but that.
Yeah.
They're taking the bus, they're not taking Ubers, they're not ordering out, they're not doing any of that shit. They are living on a fixed income, and you know and that's what it is. And that's if you're that's the norm for someone who spends their life working a job, making a median income, um, and retiring like that. That's basically what it
Yeah.
is. So once you constrict that resource, that simple, I got a fly that's going in my, yo. Once you remove parts of that social safety net, and life gets a lot bleaker real quick. In India, old people, used to, that phase of your life was meant, you go wander the land, basically. Like you're a liability to your kids and their kids, and your society as a whole that has to take care of you. So you go wander,
Yeah.
go sit on
But
a rock and you know what I mean, it's like
the
just
thing
get the
is,
fuck out.
the thing is that what we have to remember, it's easier said than done, but money does not bring happiness. You know what I'm saying? It
Yeah,
really doesn't.
I hear what
And
you're
so if
saying,
you're retired and you want to go sit on the bench and that makes you happy, it doesn't matter
but
how much money,
it doesn't make you happy if you don't have any other choice. Sometimes going to sit on the bench makes you happy. Other times, yeah, you're like, damn, I wish I could go, sit on an island on a beach. That would make me
Yeah.
happier. You know what I mean? It's like that it like these are copes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The reality of it is that there are a whole lot of fucking people and not enough beaches. You know what I mean? Not enough beach condos and not enough for everyone to say, oh, when I retire, I'm gonna go move here and live out my days. Like I would love to, retire early and go live in a warm climate, you know, sipping tequila sunrises with a beautiful woman half my age on my own.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's not gonna happen unless I put myself in a financial position to make it happen, and that's really what it comes down to. So money does matter. Money is, while you're living is all that matters, unfortunately.
Nah, it's not all that matters. Come on. That's ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous. It's true. You know what I mean? Money doesn't make you happy, but money puts you in a position to be happy. You know what I mean? Money pays for the things that make you happy. So it's like you have zero money,
Nah,
to the
I
point where you
disagree.
can't move around. I
I
mean, try
disagree.
it. Try it. Like we could do a challenge. Like let's go from now to the end of the month without spending a single dollar on anything.
That's not
Right?
possible. I have kids, so do you.
There you go. So you
All
prove my point.
right, let's go back to this because we're not going to agree on this. Money is not the only thing that matters. Not at all.
Okay.
October of the same year, over 60 million claims for unemployment insurance were filed in the US. That's hundreds of thousands more than the average. Then there was the damage to the overall economy caused by so many businesses going into hibernation. A few different figures got tossed around for the total cost, but a widely cited Harvard paper put it at around $16 trillion once you add it all together. It's a debt we'll be paying for years, and we're already seeing the effects. It's the justification for the massive inflation and price rises we've seen so far. But of course, this isn't the full story. A lot of that hardship has been caused by corporate profiteering off of the crisis. While the average American got poorer, the richest Americans made an absolute killing. The 10 richest men in the US doubled their money over the course of the pandemic, giving them 6 times more wealth than the poorest 3 billion people in the entire world. Some of that profit was from inflation. A lot more, though, was from what amounts to price gouging. Take a look at pretty much any company that raised their prices during the crisis, and you'll find that they also gave massive bonuses to their executives and shareholders. It's just yet more evidence of the massive levels of inequality in modern society. But it also shouldn't really be anything new if you've been paying attention. While this was a massive transfer of wealth, it still falls far behind what's coming in the near future, when a different kind of financial inequality in society gets addressed. Well, it should be pretty clear to most people now that there's a massive wealth gap between generations. Of course, it's pretty natural for older people to be richer than young people. They've simply had more time. And it means they've been able to work more hours, earn more money, get inheritance, and get better jobs. And on top of that, they've also had much more time to invest their earnings and see their wealth grow over time. This is all natural and expected. While economic statistics don't go back far enough, it's pretty safe to assume this has generally been true for thousands of years. But it doesn't explain why older generations feel almost unnaturally richer than younger ones. When you look at the data, every generation born after 1950 has been worse off than previous generations. A 2023 paper by David Sturrock explored this in detail. People born in the 1960s, for example, were poorer on average than those who were the same age but born in the 1950s. It's gotten even worse for each subsequent generation.
All right. So that's a trend that also goes to support what I'm trying to say. And just anecdotally, right? My grandfather, right? And I bet you can think back to your own, grandparents also. But in this country, right, where they lived, right, My grandfather worked as a die caster or something like that, like making machine parts, basically like a machinist in a company, right? And, worked a regular job, 9 to 5 job, blue collar. This guy was the only person in the house that worked. My grandmother did not work, right? They had a house with a big backyard, 2 cars, a boat, and weekends off, raised 2 kids. And while they were not wealthy or well off in any way, their quality of life at that level where they were was much, much higher than our quality of life now. Our parents' quality of life, right? Like your mother made good money, makes good money. My mother was a nurse, made decent money. My father made good money. But in my case, it took, it took 2, right? You know, um, whether they were in the same household or separate, it took 2 parents, right? The difference of, I mean, you can, as a parent, how hard it is, even with 2 parents, right, to raise a couple kids. Imagine, now, it's so much more difficult to do what they did. In order to have what my grandfather had, I'd have to, be making a very high income. The prices to maintain that lifestyle are through the roof. To buy a house, to maintain a house, there's so many, to pay the taxes on that, to pay for a boat, right? Not just to pay for it, but to maintain it and, dock it and winterize it, to have 2 cars, right? Nowadays, you're talking about 2 car payments, whereas back in the day, the price of a car, you buy it outright or you get a small loan to buy the car. And it's not something that sticks with you for 5 or 10 years where you're paying every month. Something that, you have, it's yours, I mean, it's paid off. So everything now, rent, everything is just through the roof. And part of this is probably because there's more people, vying for their own piece of the pie, the economic pie. But it's also, it's also a result of the time they lived in. I mean, like if you're born in the 50s, you're coming off of out of the World War II, which was the war that basically positioned the United States at the top. And we basically, in some way or another, were exploiting those circumstances to enrich ourselves. We had endless amounts of oil, endless amounts of steel, endless amounts of resources, and no constraints on our economic growth at the time. Now it's not the case. Population boomed. That's why they call them the baby boomers, right? Like our parents' generation. And we were basically living off of, credit, the credit of, derived from fortunate circumstances, our our position in the world, geographically and politically, and the events that preceded, right? And then you have, I mean, there's too many factors to get into. I mean, but we're basically like everything we have. We have all these things. I was saying, we have laptops, we have cameras, we have refrigerators and cheap clothes and automobiles and cell phones and all this
Yeah.
stuff that we have at our disposal that people would have dreamt about in the past. Yet we are financially more restricted in you know in the things that I guess matter. Like, everyone wants to have more space, more property. We own less as far as real assets, but we own more in terms of toys and trinkets.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that it is very important for all families to have a safe home with enough room, to wander around and to have enough money to put food on your plate, healthy food, and do some activities and stuff like that. Spending time together without just looking at each other, being able to go somewhere and do something. But yeah, I think a lot of that is, the reason why I love being in France, because, as you know, they just released a zero interest loan to buy houses or apartments. And so for me, growing up in cities my whole life and apartments in those cities, I've always wanted a home. We don't have enough to get a home, but we're getting a new apartment with a huge garden, and we're putting zero money down, and it's a zero interest loan. So we'll end up paying maybe a little bit more than rent. But we live outside of Paris, and so the rent goes a lot further. So what I was paying in Paris for a studio, a tiny little studio on a fourth walk-up floor, we now have, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, like a castle, basically, 4 bedrooms and huge living room for less
right,
than what I was paying.
and you have a zero interest loan, so you'll be done paying that loan off in a reasonable amount of time. Whereas if it was a mortgage with interest, it would take you
Right.
a lifetime to pay that off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that stuff is important. I think that,
Right. Right.
and I think
But
that
it's
yeah.
important. Oh, all right. No. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just going back to what I was trying to say earlier, in US, people are never really satisfied with what they have because they don't have what they need, so when they get what they need, they want more and more and more, because that's built into the hustle. You had to hustle to get what you need, but then once you get what you need, you don't stop for some reason. Whereas here it's different, because people are given what they need, as long as you pay your taxes and you contribute, as you've said, to the wider economy. You play your part. You don't resort to crime or whatever. You are taken care of. Whereas in the States, it's not like that. You
All right.
really.
But you recognize that that's because of where you live, and that's not the case everywhere, right?
Absolutely,
So,
that's why I live here.
and right, and France, like the U.S., is exploiting its history, right? Both have, you know, not everything that you touch and use and utilize, not all the resources that you utilize are homegrown. They weren't manufactured in France. They weren't manufactured in the U.S. These things were manufactured in China, Indonesia, India, Cambodia, right? And it's the cheap labor in those places, right? Those developing countries that make it possible for you to afford everything you have. It's the colonial past of these countries that gave them the head start that you are benefiting from. Okay. Once those developing countries pass a threshold where the quality of life there gets to a point where people no longer need to work those jobs, in the numbers required to support our consumer economies, then prices are going to go up. Your access to these things is going to go down, and you're not going to be able to rely or take for granted the availability of the things you have at your disposal today. That goes to the material goods. That also goes to the social safety net that is making it possible for your government to offer you a zero interest loan. Okay, right? So, when the economy there suffers, and you just said it, they just raised the retirement age, right? And people, the only reason they didn't raise it higher was because people like almost revolted, right?
Absolutely, they did.
True or false, right? So time will pass, and then they're never going to lower it again, right? Fair to say that. It's not like this is a temporary thing. It's going to go higher. Life expectancy, we hope, right, should rise, even though in the United States it's gone down. And as people live longer, their productive years may not extend. It may just be that they're living longer and they're languishing longer in retirement or in those older years. And they're not, once a person hits 65, 70, maybe that's it for them being able to be productive in a job, in society, in the economy. And if they're living to 100, 110 on average, right, and they have 40 of those years are spent in quote unquote retirement or in some kind of, debilitated state, whether for health reasons or other, right, then somebody has to support that group of people. And the people that are going to support that through their tax dollars are the younger people that are working. Like when I pay Social Security, I'm not paying for my own Social Security when I retire. I'm paying for people who are retired now. The money that comes out of my check is going to people who are currently retired. If there are not enough of us at my age or working age to pay taxes to make it possible to pay out Social Security for all the people retired, because there are more of them, the baby boomers are a huge group, right? When they pass, right, the next group is going to be even bigger, right? And if population is declining, there's going to be a point where the older generations are more. There are more people in the older generations than in the younger working generations. And there's not going to be enough tax money to go around to support the lives of these people and to offer all of these benefits, right? And, and that's where we hit that point where, we have a problem. And is that going to be in our lifetime? We hope not, but we have kids, so it's going to be in their lifetime, their kids' lifetime. This is, so that's why, if the lowest 20% of the population is considered poor, right? It's probably more than that, but let's say that's what it is. And then, or is, lowest 20% is unable to attain what we would consider a good quality of life, right? If that segment of the population grows, then it's in our interest to put ourselves in as high a bracket as possible now, because that creep, that bottom, that floor is rising. The water level, is rising, and the people who are at the bottom are drowning. We want to be as high up as we can. You know what I mean? Now, right? And to say that, like, it's not going to matter for our kids is
I feel you, but
we're in the predicament we're in now.
But
parents didn't think like that.
But realistically speaking, right, your kids are not they're gonna, what's the saying? They don't remember the stuff you give them. They remember the experiences you have with them. So it's like, yeah, we're used to, we're hustlers. We know, we're New Yorkers. Our parents work hard. They taught us how to work hard. And so we have a good work ethic. And whether that's saying yes sir, no sir to our boss to keep our job because we need to, or whatever, it's like, yes, you're talking about reaching a higher ceiling, so that our kids have less struggle. But honestly, they're better off with us, spending nights and weekends with them,
Yeah,
rather
but
than.
those are not two mutually exclusive things.
I mean, it is though, because it's not so easy to have a really high paying job. Most of us have regular paying jobs and we have just enough
Right.
to survive.
But what are we doing with our money? So
Well, yeah, you mentioned the materialism thing. That's true. Everyone wants toys, but you got to be fiscally smart. And I don't
yeah.
think that we I don't think
And
we.
yeah, but and what I'm saying, I'm setting the bar, above, like, how fiscally smart do you have to be if there's a program for you to get free health care and
Yeah.
for you to get a zero interest loan, right? You have to be way more thoughtful with how you spend your money if those programs don't exist, right?
Yeah,
And
but at the
if
same
the money you
time,
have access to is reducing, is
yeah.
shrinking,
I mean, fiscally smart. You keep in mind, I have never had savings. Like I once recently saved 6 G's and took my wife to DR. It's like,
Yeah.
savings is not part of my story.
That's a
It
quick.
never has
Yeah,
been.
listen, you don't have to tell me. When I save money,
You
that's where
know.
I go spend it too.
Yeah. No, but for real, so it's like fiscally smart just means,
Yeah,
it means to the best of your ability. It's contextual, so for me it means, don't buy a new computer if you can't put food on the table. It's like you
yeah.
set your own priorities, and what comes first are, for me at least, my kids having clean clothes and good food, and me being able to spend time with them, so I don't have to work 20 hours a day. um and I'm lucky because I don't, and so I've
Yeah.
created some of my
But
luck,
that
but I've also benefited from
right, and
my
that's basically
circumstances.
what you said is basically all I'm talking about. We're both
Yeah,
very lucky. Not
absolutely.
based, not and not, it's not based. It's lucky, and luck runs out, right?
And
We're
that
lucky.
luck, wait, but that luck is not based on any money that we've been given. You see what I'm saying? We had to create that luck. It's not about
No,
money.
no, we were lucky that we were born in the part of the world that we were born into. These are not things that's why it's luck, right?
But that's to say
Not,
that no one else who was born where we were born is not everyone is that lucky.
of
So at
course
a
not,
certain point,
But like, Zia, have you ever like sat by a stream, right? And let's say you drop like a big bucket of rubber duckies in the stream, right? you know, yeah, all right. Some rubber duckies landed on the bank of the stream. They never even made it into the water to start moving, right? Those ducks are unlucky, right? But all the ducks that landed in the stream, some of them, they land in the middle. Some land on the side. Some that are on the side end up in the middle. But as you go down the stream, some of those rubber duckies are going to get caught up in branches. They're going to get caught up on the bank where there's like a little cluster of leaves, and they're going to stop. They're not going to go any further, right? Some of those duckies are going to just, for whatever, they're not doing anything. They're just floating, right? Some of them are just going to make it all the way down to the end, right? And they're going to keep going, right? And it's like that's when you're talking about big issues like that, yeah, you can take an individual's experience. That's great. But when you're talking about a whole group of people, of course, some people ain't going to end up as well. And you can always count your blessings and say, oh, well, it could be worse. It could be worse. Of course, it could be worse, right? You could have been that ducky that landed on the bank, instead of the river. You could have been caught up on the, in the twigs, after 5 feet. But most of the duckies, make it down the stream at different, at different varying speeds. And it's just like, but the way they got into that stream is, is by no doing of their own. Like they
Right.
just to be able to participate in the race, right? Because somewhere else there's a whole bunch of other duckies that got put in different buckets that ended up in different places, some better, some
No,
worse. But we just were born in a part of the world where we had so much opportunity, right? And we took a lot of it for granted, right? Because there's, which is why you have immigrants that come here and overall their kids end up being way more successful because it's drilled into them that, like, this is what it would be if you were born, if we still live in our home country, this is what your life would look like right now. If they know that, then they're more likely to drill down and really take advantage of the opportunity that's in front of them.
I agree with you. I like your rubber ducky example, except for the fact that we are not rubber duckies. We have free will and we have the ability to, push ourselves further like a rubber ducky does not. You see what I mean? I like your metaphor because some make it, some don't.
Yeah, granted. But yeah, of course, right? You have free will, but even still, there are currents in life that take
Absolutely.
you to the left and to the right in different directions. But the overall
100%.
current is flowing in one direction. So you might get caught up along the way, but
you will. You can bet on that. You will definitely get caught up.
Yeah.
That's the point.
That free will point is very valid, but I don't think it the analogy I think still works because we're looking at whole populations of people, and obviously some people are going to get caught up. Some people are going to get caught up and then get themselves loose and keep flowing and have to catch up. And
everyone will to a certain extent.
To a
Everyone
different extent. All right, but I'm pressing play because we're like probably way off the topic at this
People
point.
born in the 1980s in the USA are represented by the small line in the bottom right of the graph, and they're already off to a rocky start. Even this early on in their careers, they're poorer on average than people just 10 years older than them. At this point, it all looks pretty bad, so what's actually causing this? Well, there's a few different explanations that have been thrown around for why this has happened. First, there's what we can call
I feel like when we hit ads and we play it back again, we got to go back a couple seconds because when you edit out the ad, is there like a little jump?
Not really.
Not good.
The avocado toast theory. The general idea is that each successive generation puts more focus on consumption and fleeting pleasure. Through this logic, young people are spending more of their money on things which aren't worth anything later on in life, like holidays or overpriced coffee. Of course, this doesn't really hold up as a solid answer as to why people are getting poorer. Surveys of millennials, for example, show they're not spending more money than other generations do on impractical purchases. Instead, they're spending proportionally more on things like rent, food, and electricity. It leads us into our second attempt at an explanation, one which hinges on prosperity and recession. Just look at the economic environments that people born in the 1950s lived through. Except for a few minor bumps, most of their working lives were spent in an age of prosperity and unrestricted growth. Wage and asset prices steadily increased, meaning people could invest more money into their future, and those investments quickly gained lots of value. It fits in with the picture of a blue-collar worker being able to buy a 4-bedroom house for their young family. Then that house is...
That's exactly what I was trying to talk about with my grandfather. It's a true story, And it applied to everybody back then. It's just like there was the quality of life was up here, even if your income was down here,
And so what do you think caused that to change? I think it's corrupt government, honestly. They don't care about the people in the States. They honestly don't care. They feel like as long as they're settled, they don't. I don't think
I
any politician cares, honestly. I really don't. About
I mean,
maybe some do, but
yeah.
what they're doing, the actions they're taking are not to make sure that people have social security.
No, I think they just said it. I think there was unrestricted economic growth, and there was more disposable income. So my grandfather could work a blue collar job and make enough money to afford um, recreational activities
But
like a boat,
yeah,
and
but my
even things that didn't serve him in the long run. And so if you were a person back then, you could invest in a house, you could invest in stocks, even though I'm sure much fewer people did. But if you had those, just having that disposable income gives you other options.
but
I
my
think
question
people,
is, why has that changed?
why has it changed? I think
Yeah,
one, um, it's like, all right, remember the video? We got to do another video on this. But you remember the video of the rats?
yeah, that
All
was a
right, you
great video.
remember, right? So they had unlimited access to food, recreation, space, everything. So what did they do, right? They started they started breeding, you know. Some had more access to breeding opportunities than other, granted, but they maxed out their population. They hit a point where they were overcrowded, right? And even with unlimited resources, there was limited space, and that created a lot of you know um, neurotic tendencies amongst the individuals in the study, right? And I
Mm.
think that that's really what's happening, is that we have population has grown, right, to the point where now we have all of these neurotic pleasures. Like we spend our time, young people ain't smashing as much. The babies aren't being born as frequently. People aren't getting married as often. You know what I mean? Um, and if they are, you have early termination of pregnancy, birth control, contraception. So people can indulge in the act without the consequences, right? And if they have to face the consequence, they can terminate, and it's more accepted to do so, right? So there's really no social stigma around it, right? So, you know, then we have social media, we have, people, we have video games, young kids sitting at home playing video
No,
games all day.
but make it simple for me. What in one sentence, what has changed so that we don't have disposable income with a blue collar job?
Supply and demand, you know what I mean? It's the supply of real valuable assets like homes, land, you know, um, has, I guess, stayed static, while the demand in the form of population has increased, and there's not enough to go around, you know.
Maybe in cities. I remember when I was driving through California and saw all this empty land, and I was like, I don't understand. Why don't they build houses here? Why don't they build strip malls? Like, and I forgot what my ex said to me, but there's a lot of land outside of cities that's not being used. So maybe
Right,
this
but
is a city problem.
the way the economy is structured now, most of the money is earned in cities because of the
Yeah,
type of economy and the type of work that
right,
pays money. You know what I mean? So you can live out there. What are you going to do for work? You're going to commute 4 hours every day,
right.
or are you going to farm? Well, you're not going to get as much money for as a small farmer as you used to, because now we have, industrialized farming. And so
Yeah.
maybe the answer is not like, maybe it's not government or politicians, maybe it's industry, maybe it's capitalism, maybe it's
Yeah.
maybe it's corrupt capitalism. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just like
That's what I think it is.
the pooling of wealth and resources amongst very few, and you know, and that leaving way
Yeah,
less for
because
yeah.
honestly, like if in France there's homeless people, but not really a lot. Like not to the point that there is in US, you know. If you look at San Francisco and LA and New York, I mean it's out of control. I mean,
Yeah,
but
and there's always the most homeless people in the places with the highest rent and the highest earners, right? So
yeah,
you look in San Francisco, you have Silicon Valley, you have people out there that make ridiculous amounts of money.
yeah.
Rent is ridiculously expensive. You look in New York or any big city where there's homelessness, there's a disparity. It's like, so yeah, there is definitely wealth inequality, like you know, in a totally different
And
dynamic now
isn't
than ever before.
Yeah. And isn't that, for me, it falls on the responsibility of the government to a certain extent, to be honest. Like raise the taxes on the wealthy and make sure that the homeless, like, come on, if we, someone said it, if we have $175 billion to, send to Ukraine, we can do something about the homeless issue. Like it's a matter of choice, you know?
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, you just made me think of another video we got to do after this. But yeah,
Actually,
but
we
I
have
was
to, go ahead, sorry.
no, go ahead. What were you
No,
gonna say?
we have less than an hour to finish this video and then we have to switch to yours. So we gotta
Okay,
get through it. We're on 4 minutes of 18. So
all right, let's keep it going.
we can do another one, but for this one we have to.
Easily increases in value by over 1,000%. Meanwhile, people born after them have been dealt a worse hand. Growth has tapered off, which along with 2 recessions within a decade of each other, destroyed young people's chances at a life as plentiful as their parents enjoyed. While this picture might seem more accurate, it's also definitely more depressing. But there is a third explanation as to why older generations seem so much better off than younger people do. An explanation that leaves at least some room for hope. People born in the 40s and 50s were the healthiest generation the world has ever seen, at least comparatively. In lots of the developed world, they could enjoy plentiful food and a diverse diet. Combine that with today's modern medicine, and this will easily be the longest lived generation ever, which also means they've held on to their money for a longer time, especially compared to previous generations who died younger on average and passed on their wealth earlier on. Meanwhile, each younger generation spends more time in education and enters the workforce at a later date. Then they have to wait longer for their inheritance, and it goes towards explaining why each generation might be worse off. But it's this third explanation that brings us onto the idea of the Great Wealth Transfer, $84 trillion that are gonna fall into younger people's hands. In lots of people's minds, this will be the jumpstart that our stagnant economy needs to give people hope again. It will supposedly even out the inequality that's come from the 2008 recession and COVID. At least that's the optimistic version. However, the question still remains though, is this actually going to happen?
A Duramax 3-liter turbo diesel engine.
However, they'll be passing on to a generation that's already lived through multiple recessions and financial crises, who have seen just how quickly something like a 401k can lose double digits overnight. So an entirely new generation of wealth will be going about things a bit differently than their parents and grandparents. To answer that problem, we need to look at how that $84 trillion is actually distributed and who actually owns it. This chart shows us the general distribution of wealth across generations in the US from the first quarter of 2024, with nearly 52% of the total amount, baby boomers or people born between 1946 and 1964 are by far the richest generation. The silent generation and anyone older than them make up another 13% of the total. It leaves about a third of the US's total wealth still in play, most of which is owned by people from Generation X. The remaining figure, which amounts to less than 10% of the total wealth, is distributed between millennials and Generation Z. So what does this tell us? Well, at first glance, it seems to give a lot of power to the idea of a great wealth transfer. Nearly 2/3 of the wealth in the US is owned by people born before 1964. Even the youngest people in this age group will be 80 years old in 2 decades' time. By that point, we could reasonably expect most of them to have passed away. It's not something anyone should be looking forward to. A lot of parents and grandparents will be lost. But this natural process does seem to offer the wider economy an opportunity to redistribute itself. It's estimated over the next 2 decades, boomers and the silent generation are going to hand down over $84 trillion in savings, assets, and pensions. Some of that money will go to charities, which are often included in people's wills, but the majority, around $72 trillion, will instead pass to the families of those who pass away. A 2021 paper estimated how this will be split. Only $4 trillion will go to other baby boomers, while $30 trillion and $27 trillion will go to Gen Xers and millennials respectively. The remaining $11 trillion will pass straight to Generation Z. It brings us to yet another problem with the idea of a great wealth transfer. That $72 trillion that boomers and the silent generation will pass along is not going to be spread out equally. Quite simply, not all baby boomers are rich. In fact, most of them aren't. They haven't been spared by the rise of inequality. From 2004 to 2016, the share of wealth among baby boomers got even less equal. In 2004, the poor half of baby boomers owned just 3% of the wealth. Over the next 12 years, it dropped by a third to just 2% of the wealth. Meanwhile, the top 25% of baby boomers went from owning 86% of the wealth to 91% of it. What all of this means is that a small proportion of the population will come into a lot of money, but it won't really mean anything for everyone else. The meaningful split is between homeowners and renters. Elderly homeowners have an average net worth of around $300,000, with a little under half of that tied up in property. Meanwhile, renters had an average of just $6,700 to their names. So lots of elderly people have pretty much nothing to hand down financially, while those that do often have lots of it tied up in their homes. It's not a good picture for most people, and even people who are set for an inheritance might not really get as much as they expect. There's a lot of different things that are going to take away from what people can pass down. The most costly is elderly care. Anyone who's got parents or grandparents in full-time care knows how incredibly expensive it often is. In fact, while price rises in other sectors have begun to level off recently, the same
Yo, low key, if I had money to buy land, that's what you do. Like, you buy land and you set up like an old person's home. You know what I mean? It's like that might be the most logical place to invest over the next 40 years that we're going to be alive. You know?
Yo, did you see that movie on Netflix where I forget what it's called, where they're taking advantage of the old people? It was so good. And there's a lot of stories about how a lot of the scams are on taking money from old people. You know, like it's so,
I mean, because they have the money, as this video is pointing out, and
it's easy to take it.
Yeah, and they're
my grandmother, she her previous at-home care person, because she's about to be 100 in December, her previous person who was with her for like, I don't know, 10 years or something, was slowly taking money from her, you know? And when they realized it not too long ago, they realized it was like thousands of dollars that she took. And it's messed up because it was hard to get it back, but just the stress of it all. But yeah, I mean, elderly care is probably lucrative, but
it's also
so elderly abuse. Elderly abuse is rampant.
Prevalent. It's prevalent. Like, just like you know, child abuse. Yeah, it's like, you know, and you know, the only thing is that kids don't have any money. You know, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely a thing. But when you think about it, like, you know, the growing need for people who are at that age and need to be cared for, the you know, the higher demand with the shrinking supply of working age people to do it, then you're thinking about, all right, well, will there be robotics and AI filling in partially, which is bleak, because then you're talking about old people having conversations with, you know, Alexa, basically.
But not really though, because I was working on this one project where they were developing a robot for dementia and elderly people,
Yeah.
elderly people and people with dementia. And it wasn't so much they were interacting with the robot, but more that the robot was a conduit to help them interact with other humans, you know. So like it would help them in their care, but it would make it easy, because you know elderly people don't know how to use technology the same way young people
Yeah.
do. So it's like it's making it more accessible for them. So they're not really talking to a robot, but they're helping them talk to other humans. But yeah, I mean, elderly care is probably, you know, it would be, I agree with you. It would be good to have like better elderly care services, you know, especially with that population decline that you've been mentioning. It's probably more and more important these days, you know.
Without a doubt. All right, let's get back into it.
Be said for elder care. For years now, rises in those costs have steadily outpaced inflation in the US. In the UK, it's even worse. In just the 2 years between 2021 and 2023, elderly care costs rose by nearly 20%. Today, the cost of the average care home is over £1,300 a week, 4 times more than the state pension pays out. While modern medicine is a blessing and has saved so many lives, it does mean elderly people with complex and costly health issues tend to live a lot longer. These costs can absolutely decimate any modest inheritance. The industry is absolutely swamped as well, which has led to much higher demand and therefore a much higher price. The baby boomer generation is proportionally the largest, which means there's an ever-increasing amount of people needing full-time support. We can expect far more people will need care over the next 20 years than will be willing to provide it. Corporate owners of care homes have been happy to enjoy the...
You know what else? Well, you had this good idea to do a video on the differences between Europe and US in terms of living. You know,
Right.
one of the major differences, and what I do for work, is publicly funded research, right? So taxpayers are basically paying my salary. So what we do is we find technological problems to societal issues. So a huge amount of money, billions and
Like
billions of
technological solutions to societal problems.
right. And so billions of dollars. I mostly work in the construction industry, building industry, and energy, right? But technologies for those industries. And so the billions of dollars are going to this publicly funded research in Europe, right? It's actually spread outside of Europe to like I think Turkey is in Europe, but now, you know, you can have partners in Egypt and Morocco and certain countries. But for in Europe alone, it's been, you know, for as for a long time, where they pay, you know, into finding these solutions with researchers. And so my point is that in US you don't have that. You do not have any research going into helping society get better. You know, like the only research is going to medicine. That's it. And it's private funded, and it goes into the medical big pharma industry. That's all it is. You know, there's some research in technology and this, but it's private, you know. So
Yeah.
it does.
It's probably
So
more private.
it's a huge difference between the two, you know, cultures. You know, like in Europe, they're putting they're putting their money where their mouth is to help their people, you know. And the reason why I'm thinking of it now is because there's a huge program that's specifically for helping elderly people have a better quality of life, better homes, you know, everything, all types of, you know, improvements for elderly folks. And you know, it's publicly funded research, you know, and it works. Like a lot of these solutions they get commercialized and they get, you know, adopted. So that's one thing that, you know, if we're comparing the two cultures, you know, it's a clear difference, and obviously it's like almost objectively better. Like there's nothing really anyone can say that could, you know, that could argue the point that only privately funded research and mostly for medical or private technologies is better than what I'm explaining in European funded research, right?
I don't have enough information to say anything to refute what you're saying, but
Yeah.
yeah, it sounds like it. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Increase demand, prices, and profits, but they rarely put it back into the business. Instead, because spaces are generally limited and demand will always be high, they can pay the bare minimum in running costs. Understaffing is almost expected in care homes, while pay remains low for employees. It means that if you want to be sure that your elderly relative or loved one is getting
This is why I stopped shopping on Amazon, and you should too. Don't spend another dime on Amazon.
the care they deserve, you've only really got two options. Either you can pay more for a more expensive care home, which is obviously impossible for most people, or you have to be there regularly so that you can be sure your loved one's needs are being taken care of. The bottom line though is that tons of people just won't see this great wealth transfer happen for them. Any inheritance they might have been expecting is long gone before they can collect it, or it never even existed to begin with. In the worst of cases, the death of an elderly loved one can actually end up costing their relatives more money once you factor in predatory funeral costs. It might be true that the great wealth transfer offers some people a lot of opportunity. It just might not be the right people to actually help the economy for average normal people. Just take a look at what's beginning to happen to the agriculture industry. If there's one thing that nearly all of America's farmers have in common, it's their age. In 2022, the average age of a farmer from the US was a staggering 58 years old. In the 5 years before, the average age of a farmer got older, rising by a little over half a year. It means that farmers are only getting older on average, with a large proportion getting close to retirement. Agriculture is a hard industry to survive in. If you're running a small operation like most of America's farms, then it means long hours of manual labor. Whether you can make a profit or not is dependent not just on your work, but on the weather, crop harvests, and price fluctuations in the markets. Even in good years, the margins are low and they've been getting lower. It all makes farming an unattractive prospect for young people, even if they have enough money to get started in the first place. Meanwhile, lots of farmers are getting too old to operate their farms, and often they can't even afford to retire as their debts are so high, forcing lots of them to sell. Now, part of the great wealth transfer is going to involve lots of small farms going under the hammer, with only a few new farmers to fill the vacuum. It's a crisis, and if there's anyone who knows how to take advantage, it's the corporations. While they might not be very interested in agriculture itself as an industry, they are interested in the land the farms are on. Just like any asset like property or stocks, it's ripe for speculation and financial manipulation. But owning farmland as an asset also carries lots of tax benefits. As a long-term investment, it dodges the short-term capital gains tax, which is a lot higher than the tax you get if you own something for over a year. You can even avoid the capital gains tax entirely if you sell one farm to buy another, letting corporations constantly leap from farm to farm, gaining a larger property portfolio in the process. But that's not the only benefit for wealthy investors. You can write off other losses against the cost of operating the farm, while getting access to government subsidies meant to help out smaller family-owned operations. It's a perfect storm of incentives that are turning mass corporate ownership of farmland into something unavoidable. But with all of this out of the way, how bad has it gotten so far? Well, this is where we finally get some good news. The gold rush for corporations here hasn't really started yet, although we are starting to see some concerning trends. It's hard to really get a good idea of how many farms are owned by corporations as you'd imagine them, because technically most farms are corporate owned. Even for small farmers, it makes financial sense to run your farm as a corporation on paper. So while a very large percentage of farms are corporately owned, lots of those are still actually owned by the farmers themselves. Despite that confusion, we can still gain some insight though. Farmland has been rising in cost at around 5% a year, generally outpacing inflation. That's despite the profit margins for agriculture falling, as well as the demand for farmland among normal people also going down. It means it's likely that there's speculation going on, and a bubble might be starting to form. We've already seen how much damage corporate ownership of single-family homes has done to the overall market. When investment firms and hedge funds got their billions involved, it made it all more expensive and
So now he's speaking to what we were talking about, the cause, and a lot of this has to do with corporate greed and, the incentive to speculate on the I guess the assets that used to be available to the average person. So instead of the average person being able to buy a house in a fair market for a fair price, you're basically competing against corporations that are buying, residential houses and then renting them out or just holding on to them as an asset to be able to reap the benefit of the tax benefit of owning said house.
Yeah. And this scary part of that is that, with corporations, they're encouraged every year over year to reduce their to increase their margin. So they have actually you know, to the shareholders, they have a duty,
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and
Yeah, 100%.
so, and there's only so much you can do ethically to do that, but they still have to keep doing it, you know. So they use, like, look at Detroit, you know, not Detroit, Flint, Michigan, like with the water, you know. These are examples of corporations gone wrong, and there's tons of them. And you know, it's this is not getting any better, you know. Like, it's not, the more corrupt the government is, the worse the corporate landscape will be,
Right.
in terms of increasing the wealthy inequality. And so, yeah, I mean, that's why it's important, the, you know, elections and the actual actions of specific governments, because honestly, government as a whole is intrinsically corrupt. Like, it's not, it's intended to help the people, but I don't know, you know, I think there's so many governments, probably the majority of them, that aren't really doing that. They're just finding a way for corporations to get in bed, and you know, it's not getting better. And you know, I don't see a sea change in the horizon, you know, especially with AI. It's just, it's hard to be optimistic about the future,
Right.
for our kids and their kids. But at the same time, everyone, like, we all have our struggles, our set of struggles. Your parents, our parents, our grandparents, their parents, their grandparents. And hopefully, the younger generations will find a way to, I think getting involved in politics for young kids, that's why it's important, like all this, this woke stuff. Like, these kids nowadays need to be smart. Like, they need to be, disciplined and have a good head on their shoulders in order to help.
And you think that being woke feeds
No,
into
is
that?
I think it feeds into it negatively. Like, because look,
Okay.
we were looking at I was looking at Charlie Kirk talk to these, these college kids, and they just, obviously, they're picking some out. They're not all stupid, but it's, the wokeness is a danger, honestly, because it's like they're prioritizing the wrong things, like, it's, yeah, I mean, videos like this make me think less about my own family, as I was in the beginning of our discussion, and more about, other families, and how can
Well,
my
society as a whole, and
yeah,
our families live within these societies, and,
right,
and don't sleep. A lot of this is going on in Europe as well.
of course,
Uh,
of course,
just there's just a different political structure, and it's just a different flavor. But
yeah.
all right, jumping back in.
Priced out regular people. The fear is that the same thing is now going to happen to farmland as well. While it hasn't really caught on yet amongst the Wall Street elites, it's a growing trend. Famously, Bill Gates has bought thousands and thousands of hectares of farmland. Bezos owns over 400,000 hectares himself. Large investment firms have also gotten in on the rush. From
Why is he calling them hectares instead of acres?
I don't know, but hectares is a thing. It's like 100 acres or something. Maybe that's
But the number was well,
acres.
I guess it's still thousands and thousands. No, you said 100, more than
He said
400,000.
400,000, and the number was 400,000 acres. So
Yeah,
it may just be
but
his accent.
either way, it's a lot of land,
Yeah,
and it's definitely well known that big corporations and big financial institutions are buying up land, and
yeah.
that's driving up the price for the average person.
Not only that, but they're using pesticides and getting through, talking about their stuff is organic and, grass fed. I saw this video about grass fed cows where they just dump grass all over cows that are still locked up and call them grass fed. you know. So it's like all of
Well,
these
they are.
loopholes.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but then you're marking up the cost of that grass-fed beef, you know.
Yeah, but then how do you provide protein for the hundreds of millions of people that you have to feed if you
Well,
are within your economy that need to get food? So like people live in cities, it's very expensive to transport food into cities, and there are huge populations of people, like, you know, just in one apartment block everyone is sitting down at the table to eat dinner tonight or ordering out, or, you know, and if you just try to wrap your head around the, you know, just thinking about, you know, forget about all the different food sources, but just protein, like, you know, animal agriculture, chicken, beef, pork, right? Fish, right? Um, how how do you feed all these people? I
yeah,
mean, you
but
know, it's mind-boggling. Like right now, people are complaining the price of beef is going up, or the price of meat, period. And it's true; it's very expensive. Like for a ribeye steak, it's like knocking on $20 for one steak, right? That's a lot of fucking money, you know, for a steak that I used to be able to get for like $10 not so long ago. You know what I mean?
yeah,
$9, $10. You know, so that's a, you know, that's a big
yeah,
rate of inflation right there. And you think about, you know, but it makes sense at the same time, because it's like there are so many mouths to feed. um you know, now that the economy is less reliant on, you know, agriculture, as far as like, you know, the small farms, they're dying out. You have these humongous agro businesses that are, you know, and we want to, you know, complain about that, but there's really no other way, because there's, you know, there has to be a more efficient way. You can't have a family who has, you know, 100 cattle and, you know, 100 acres to grow corn or wheat or whatever the hell they grow, and expect to source from all those thousands of farms the quantity of food that you can source from one gigantic, you know, business that just does it like a factory, you know what I mean? And uses, you know, that's completely mechanized. And, you know, there's just, you know, there's really no other way, you know? So we
yeah.
all push for organic and grass fed, pasture raised, all this shit. But pasture raised on what pasture? There's no
Yeah.
pasture to feed all these
Now,
fucking.
what I was referring to is more regulatory standpoint, because, you know, like in France, every single meat is organic by law. So there's
Right.
no organic label, you know,
Yeah.
that right. So my point is that it's really a regulatory thing.
But but
Food
but
in
but
terms
you,
of
but yeah,
hunger, in terms of like food shortages, that's different. Like
yeah.
that's a whole nother conversation. But I'm
But
talking about
wait, Zia. But one thing you have to appreciate is that, you know, you know, France. How many people live in France,
I have no idea.
or how many people live in Europe, right?
I have no clue.
Right. I mean, look it up real fast. So I'd be curious to know, because, you know, I would venture to think that
750 million
million in Europe,
in
right?
Europe. In
Right.
France,
And but
it's
then look at, but and then where do most of the products
66
come?
million.
Where do
66.5 million.
in France? So France
Yeah.
is one country. I mean, I don't know if you can still look at it like that, but yeah, it's one country. You know, you're below a certain threshold, right? You know, half of your country is California, basically. You know,
Mhm.
so you're below a certain threshold where you probably have the ability to provide those things, whereas, you know, that might not be the case here. You know what I mean? Especially when you live on one, landmass, you're connected to Asia. So a lot of your products, whether it be produce or just products in general, can come, I'm venturing to believe, like, you have more access to those manufacturing bases and those agricultural bases than we do here,
Right.
So when it's winter, we're getting fruit from Chile, right? Or South America. When it's when you talk about just about everything that we use, it's coming from Asia, right? And it's just a different, there's different shipping routes and different the chain of
but
is completely different.
Yeah, but what I was referring to is, like, we were talking in the context of farms, right? And
Yeah.
corporations buying the farms. And then I mentioned pesticides because, there's no regulatory, boundaries in US when the corporations are buying the farms and looking for cheap ways to farm those lands,
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
and that health risk gets passed on to the people, and no one's talking about it, like.
And that definitely, and I agree with you. It definitely has to do with corporate greed. Run amok, because they want to increase their profit margins
Exactly
while producing more product, and that the only way to do that is to, use pesticides, genetically modified organisms or foods, and without a doubt. And if you're raising animals in confined spaces, you're talking about antibiotics and all kinds of you want more productive animals in 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 housed in circumstances that are less conducive to that. So you're trying to genetically modify things and enhance the output of these animals without giving them the access to grazing pastures to graze on, or sunlight, or any of that shit. It's depressing,
like, KFC is not chicken. It's not allowed to be called Kentucky Fried Chicken because it's cluck. It's a genetically modified version of a chicken, so they can't call themselves Kentucky Fried Chicken because it's cluck. Things
that's
like
why
this.
that's why KFC tastes so much better when you go to a developing country, because they're actually using chicken.
Exactly.
No, I hear you. It's a problem. We're moving into, it's just a depressing dystopian future, it seems.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, but let me press play.
2008 to 2023, the amount of farmland bought up by investment firms went up by over 200%. The reasons this is happening are fairly simple on the face of it. Things like single-family homes and farmland, they're stable assets, or at least in the case of homes, they used to be. For a company whose only interest is in safeguarding and growing their pile of money, it's a great place to put your profits. The same thing that happened with the property market could easily happen on a smaller scale with farmland. At first, decades before the 2008 crash, with the whole property bubble bursting, banks just saw property as a boring, safe asset. But as they started speculating on them and betting more money on the housing market stability, it became much more lucrative. Over time, the greed for more profits only got worse, leading to more speculation, which inflated the value of property even more. The banks and the investment funds made even more money until it all came crashing.
Hi, I'm Micheline, and I'm a therapist that goes to therapy. And many of you may find that strange because you might be thinking, why does somebody that has
crashing down, taking the economy and millions of people's savings with it? Farmland right now is on a similar journey today, but with a few key differences. We're still seeing the beginning of speculation. Prices are going up despite the reduced demand right now. And it's because billionaires and investment funds see the long-term opportunity here. The supply of land can't go up, but the demand can. In fact, the supply of farmable land is going to shrink instead. As the climate gets hotter, more land is estimated to become unsuitable for crops or pasture. It's these signs that point to comparatively low prices now, with much higher prices down the line. It's not a strong enough bet for a real fast sale on farmland right now, but it's getting more attractive to institutional investors every single day. COVID was one opportunity. Lots of excess profits were lying around for the funds and the billionaires. The Great Wealth Transfer will offer a similar opportunity by lowering the prices. The situation gets truly concerning though when you look at what the consequences will be for the future. While it's pretty doubtful that Bill Gates is plotting a feudal takeover by controlling the food supply, it does give him much more power. And as we've shown in the video we did on him before, he's certainly not the guy who should be getting this power.
It's really not just one person controlling that much farmland. It's having a technocrat. I think that Bill Gates, not just Bill Gates, but the people like Bill Gates, find technology as being the solution for every problem. If the only tool you got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And with what he's done in Africa and India and some other places, caused me to really, nothing I can do about it. It's caused me to really disdain technocrats controlling land.
We like to think we've advanced past these medieval seeming ideas, but at the end of the day, control over food and land is what's given people power for thousands of years. This transition from lots of independent farmers owning their farms to just a few wealthy landowners is a slide back towards feudalism however you look at it. There might not be any castles or knights anymore, but the power is still shifting in that direction. It's pretty likely that this isn't what drives these decisions. It's probably just about money as it always is. But all these greedy decisions have a way of eventually shifting the scales themselves. Inevitably, it all lines up with the greater shift towards inequality. They want to own everything and they have the money to buy it. In this way, the Great Wealth Transfer doesn't represent an escape from this reality. Instead, it's just another opportunity the powerful will use to take even more of the pie. Eventually, as just a few entities come to own nearly all of the farmland, it would let them create a monopoly and manipulate prices even more. With such big problems, it's hard to offer real solutions. But it is worth mentioning though that this problem with farmland will only get worse if more regular people aren't willing to take the risk and buy these farms themselves. You can be sure that most farmers would much rather their land went to another family rather than getting added to some Wall Street property portfolio. They're not selling it to corporations and investors out of choice. So while farming is one of the hardest jobs you can do, it's also one of the most rewarding simply because it puts some distance between you and this modern world of greed and financial exploitation. The death of family-owned farms will also be the death of one of the only bargaining chips regular people still have, and we can't let them take this away as well.
Yeah, no, I think he hits the nail on the head. I mean, I've heard talk of a wealth transfer with the aging population, and I do agree that, there are people smarter than us, more informed than us, that have a jump on us regarding this coming, wealth transfer, and they've speculated appropriately to be able to swallow up the lion's share of it. So as a regular working person, I don't think that there's a whole lot of hope in waiting for a wealth transfer to take place. Even as an individual with retired parents, when I look at the amount of money that they have to spend, I can see like they're struggling to pay their bills. My mother had to take a job in retirement to subsidize her income because Social Security and pension was not quite enough. Now, granted, she has her expenses, and she's trying to maintain her quality of life the way it was when she was working. But, most people, I'm assuming, can't sit around and just expect to inherit. That a lot of that money, like you pointed out, that's sitting in the hands of these older generations is being consumed while they're still living, whether it be through elder care or just through them trying to pay their monthly expenses. There's, inflation is a huge tax on retired people because they're using the money they made before the dollar or the currency was inflated to live as, their dollar is going, is not going as far. So if you have now in your 40s, $100,000 invested for retirement, and you expect that to grow, it will. But when you retire, let's say it's at $500,000, that money is not going to go as far as it did when you earned it, you know?
Yeah.
And are you getting returns on that money? Like, you know, basically, are you at the point, like there's a threshold that you have to get to where you're making enough off of interest, basically, to afford your lifestyle. And if you're not at that point, inflation is not going to stop. You know, money is going to be worth less tomorrow than it is today, and that's going to continue. So,
for sure.
you know, in this country at least, you know, everyone's, either trying to live off of dividends, trying to live off of interest, or get to the point where, you know, that is enough to subsidize what you can expect to get from Social Security, or if you're lucky enough, your pension. You know, pensions are not as common as they once were. So, you know, it's just, you know, it's bleak. You know, it's bleak.
But at the same time, it's bleak. But we also have to consider, you know, the gold rush of AI, right? Because if you had 100,000 saved, right, you can easily leverage AI to invest that smarter than you would without AI. You know, like if you have a little bit of money saved up, you know, it takes money to make money, the old adage, right?
I mean, I've seen people talk about that too. I haven't figured out how to do that yet. You know,
right? No, I'm not saying it's easy. Just like the influencer economy, you know, it's not easy. It's definitely not easy.
Well, if it's not available for
but
the
it
average
is real.
person,
It is real.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about what is readily accessible for the average person, and even if you or I were able to crack that code and utilize that to our benefit, you know, we're talking about the average person. You know, this video is talking about the average person, and you know,
yeah. But look at ChatGPT, right? AI is not new, right? AI is definitely not new. AI has been existing way before you and I were born, right? But the ChatGPT era is
AI.
making it.
In what form did it exist before you and I were born?
Artificial intelligence, any algorithm is AI. So anything that existed digitally with an algorithm, and everything digitally has an algorithm. It's the brain but behind anything digital.
All right, but yeah,
So
you're expanding the meaning of AI beyond what, you know, like
my
the
point
scope.
is that it's becoming more accessible day by day, right? ChatGPT is one example of how it's becoming more accessible, right? But look at our lives before ChatGPT. You know, they were different, and so kids who grow we grew up
How
without
different?
computers.
How
We grew
different?
up with okay, forget ChatGPT. We grew up without computers, my G. Come on, we didn't even have. Right? We didn't have mobile phones. Like we had beepers if we were lucky, right?
What does it have to do with what does that have to do with anything?
I'm saying it's becoming more accessible technology, and anyone who is not utilizing technology as leverage to help improve their own circumstances is wasting an opportunity. And so
Right,
our
right,
kids
right,
who
right.
are growing up with it are going to have more options at their fingertips.
I disagree. It's going to be normalized. It's like saying anyone who doesn't have a cell phone is going to get left behind. Everybody has a cell phone, right? Everyone who these are emerging technologies, and they change, you know, our capabilities as individuals, right? But these are things that are going to be equally available to everybody, or let's say what's available to it's gonna trickle down. So like the cell phone was available in the 80s to the wealthiest people, and it is prohibitively expensive, and then the price dropped to the point where everyone now in every third world country can have their own cell phone, right? And the same is going to happen with AI. It's not going to it's not going to it's not going to create opportunity for everyone just based on the fact that they have it. Everyone's going to have it. It's just going to, raise the bar of what has to be done to get an advantage. Everyone's going to have access to it. It may, if the only way it benefits everyone is if it's, distributed or utilized in a way that it frees up people's time, and it makes certain things available.
That's exactly what it does.
No, it frees up. No, but it has to replace
come on,
like
man.
certain functions
It's the exact same thing as machinery. Look at farmers before machinery, right? They had to till all their land, and they couldn't. You see what I'm saying?
All right, but meanwhile, farms are dying out, right?
They're not dying out. They're being bought by corporations.
You're also, You're also competing against the monopolization of this technology, right? So we have access to it. We have access. We're not high-level users of this technology.
But nothing's stopping us from becoming high-level users.
Nothing's stopping anybody. But the reality of it is that the average person is going to be the average person. There's always going to be a disparity in, now granted, right? I try to use AI when I can in my day-to-day life, and it comes in very useful most of the time. But to use it in a way that, if let's say I'm starting a business and I'm using it to save time on certain things, right? The next person's doing the same thing, right? It's still relative. It's still relative to everyone else around you. So I'm using my cell phone, right? And it gives me the opportunity to do research and connect with people and network, and I can use it for any number of different things, right? But so can everyone else, right? So it just
but look, you're sleeping, yo.
Look, the advantage. No, bro. The advantage comes from being the only ape that knows how to use a tool.
That's not true. The advantage comes from first movers.
There is no advantage.
No.
Right? Yeah, that's what I just said. That's what I just said.
Listen, here's an example, okay? Not too long ago, to build a website, you had to learn code. You taught yourself coding, right? Now, all you got to do is press a button and the website is built for you. It's free. Right. The world is not, we're only bound by bad ideas.
That advantage only it only benefits first movers, right?
Yeah.
And right. Granted. All right, and you have to have the ambition and the drive and the work ethic to make it work, right? And to apply yourself to.
If it becomes normalized, then everyone will have that opportunity at their fingertips.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, but opportunity doesn't mean it. Opportunity is just opportunity. You know what I mean? Everyone has opportunity, right? We all have that's the whole thing, is that there's also missed opportunity, right? So it's like, just because the opportunity is there doesn't mean everyone's going to jump on it in reality, right? And it also once it becomes mainstream and everyone has access to it, the advantage of that technology is not there. You have to be on the cutting edge to really reap the benefit of any technology, right? Which is why, and that usually comes with a certain risk tolerance and a certain level a certain level of capital to invest and be, and a certain level of, intellect and intuition to recognize where to expose yourself to that risk and where to put that capital and invest your time and your money, right? So it's like, we're talking about, we don't disagree necessarily, but we're talking about two different things, right? The technology in and of itself doesn't change it changes the rule of the game, but it doesn't level the playing field, right? There are new ways to do things, but it doesn't mean that everyone's going to be able to reap the benefit of it. You know what I mean? You have to be on the cusp of the new technology in order to be reaping the benefit of it. And to be real with you, the entities that have the advantage are the people that already have the advantage with the old technology, right? Which is why the corporations are the ones that have the capital and the foresight and the knowledge to buy the stock before it blows up, or to buy the land before the price increases, or to invest properly. By the time that information gets to the average person, it's usually too late. You know what I mean? You understand what I'm saying? So it's like, the fact that we know about AI and we utilize it is probably, like, a lot of people don't. Granted, I talk about ChatGPT to people that just, they never really investigated. It's right there on their phone. They could do it just like me or you. But in 10 years, it's going to be mainstream. Everyone's going to do their searching on ChatGPT instead of Google, or they're going to do it on, already every social media site has their own built-in, AI. So it's like, it's getting integrated into everything. It doesn't mean it's a given that it makes it more possible to use that as an avenue to get where you want to go, but it doesn't mean that everyone's suddenly it's going to be a boon to the economy. The only way it really helps people is if it frees up people's time and it changes the structure of work so that people have more disposable income, more time to reap the benefits, more leisure time, more access to other possibilities outside of that. I have to work 9 to 5 for this many weeks a year, and I get my 2 weeks off.
That's exactly what I think it's doing. Anyway, I think we need to close this and do an AI video. You remember that guy you found, and he had predictions like 20 years ahead, 50 years ahead? You remember that video we watched? The guy, he was an AI commentator. It was before ChatGPT, or at the beginning of ChatGPT.
Yeah, something Shapiro, right?
So I don't know, but you said you have like a playlist of AI stuff, including trades.
Yeah, we got some stuff on deck. Yeah. All right. Well, good conversation.
Yeah, it was nice for sure.
It was an interesting video. I definitely recommend people check out Moon and his content, and definitely like and subscribe to the video if you got any value out of hearing two nitwits talk about stuff that we probably don't need to be talking about. But all right, man. Zoo, to the next one.
All right, no doubt. Peace, world.
Peace.